Rome wakes before dawn. A senator does not sleep. He sits upright in the dark, listening for footsteps that may never come, or may come at any moment. Outside his door, the city breathes softly. Inside, fear coils like a serpent. He has been accused, not of murder, not of treason, but of corruption. And in Domitian's Rome, corruption is a death sentence. Domitian Flavius Caesar was not meant to rule. He was the younger son, the afterthought, the quiet shadow behind greatness. His father, Vespasian, seized the throne after civil war and chaos. His brother, Titus, was beloved, conqueror of Jerusalem, darling of the people, the emperor who ended disasters with compassion. Domitian watched. He watched Rome cheer for his brother. He watched senators smile politely at him, and then turn away. He watched power pass him by. When Titus died suddenly in AD 81, Rome expected mourning. Instead, Domitian moved fast. Within hours, he was emperor. No debate, no delay. And from this first moment, the Senate sensed something chilling. This emperor would not be managed. Rome at the end of the 1st century was wealthy and rotten. Behind marble temples and public games, senators sold verdicts. Governors looted provinces. Tax collectors extorted citizens. Informers thrived on false accusations. The Republic's old virtues were gone. Corruption was not an exception. It was how Rome worked. Previous emperors tolerated it. Some profited from it. Domitian did not. He believed corruption was not just immoral, it was existential. If Rome's elites rot, he reportedly said, the empire will follow. And so, he chose fear. Domitian revived old laws long left dormant. Maestas, crimes against the dignity of the emperor. Financial crimes framed as betrayal. Corruption recasted as treason. This was revolutionary and terrifying. A senator accused of bribery was no longer just dishonest. He was now an enemy of the state. Trials multiplied. So did executions. Here is the paradox of Domitian. He did not execute endlessly to enrich himself. He did not kill out of madness. He killed to end corruption trials altogether. By making punishment absolute, Domitian believed he could end terrifying elites into honesty, end endless litigation, destroy the culture of informers, restore discipline, and in many cases, it worked. Corruption dropped. Provincial administration improved. The treasury stabilized. But Rome paid another price. Silence, fear, hatred. The Senate had never been less powerful. Domitian controlled trials personally, executing senators without consultation. He called himself Dominus de Deus, Lord and God. To senators, he was not a reformer. He was a monster, and they would never forgive him. And when he died, they would make sure history never did either. Before Domitian, Rome was drowning in accusations. Not justice, accusations. Professional informers, known as delatators, prowled the capital. They whispered into ears, filed charges, even fabricated evidence. Their reward was simple: a share of confiscated property, political favor, revenge. A senator did not need to be guilty, only wealthy. Trials clogged the courts. Careers ended on rumors. Provincial governors ruled through bribery, knowing they could always buy acquittal later. Rome was not governed by laws, it was governed by fear of accusations. Domitian despised the system, but instead of reforming it gently, he chose annihilation. Domitian made a radical legal move. He blurred the lines between financial corruption and treason against the emperor. Bribery was no longer merely theft. Embezzlement was no longer mismanagement. They were acts of betrayal, proof that the accused placed personal gain above the empire. Under Maestra law, trials were swift, verdicts final, appeals were non-existent, and punishment was death. A Roman jurist wrote later, under Domitian, a dishonest hand was treated as a dagger at the emperor's throat. This terrified the elites, and that was the point. Domitian did not trust the Senate to judge itself. He presided over trials personally. He interrogated defendants. He dismissed procedural traditions centuries old. To the aristocracy, this was sacrilege, but to Domitian, it was necessity. He believed senators were incapable of reform, only discipline. One senator, accused of extortion in Asia Minor, begged for mercy. "I followed the customs of my predecessor." Domitian replied coldly, "Then Rome's customs are corrupt." The man was executed, his estate seized, his name erased from public records. Others learned quickly. Domitian's executions were not random, they were targeted. Governors who extorted providences, senators who bribed juries, magistrates who sold offices, informers who fabricated cases. Some were exiled, others executed publicly. The message was unmistakable. The old rules no longer apply. One contemporary noted, "Men stopped boasting of their wealth. They stopped speaking freely, and strangely, they stopped stealing." Provincial records show a measurable improvement in tax revenue stabilized. Complaints from provinces dropped. Infrastructure spending increased. Rome functioned better. Rome felt worse. Fear changed everything. Senators stopped speaking openly. Political debate vanished. Flattery replaced dissent. Domitian encouraged it. He demanded ritualized praise. He punished sarcasm as sedition. He rewarded obedience lavishly. To the people, this brought order. To the elite, it brought humiliation. A later historian would sneer, "He made good laws and enforced them like a tyrant." But Domitian did not care for love. He cared for control. But here lies the deepest irony. Domitian hated informers. Once corruption trials slowed, he turned on the delatators themselves. Some were executed, some were exiled, their rewards stripped. The very class that had thrived under fear was destroyed by it. His goal was clear: end corruption by making accusations itself dangerous. In this, he partially succeeded, but the damage was already done. The Senate had learned something crucial. Domitian would never stop. By the early 90s AD, senators whispered of tyranny. Courtiers feared denunciation. Even Domitian's family kept secrets. Rome was stable, Rome was efficient, but Rome was terrified. And hatred, once planted, does not fade quietly. It waits. In Domitian's Rome, executions were not spectacles for the mob. It was a message for the elites. There were no roaring crowds in the Colosseum. There were sealed chambers, quiet orders, and names removed from stone. A senator might attend dinner one evening and be dead before dawn. Domitian understood something brutal and simple. Rome's corruption was protected by tradition. Tradition could only be broken by fear, and so fear became policy. The early executions shocked Rome because of who died. Not rebels, not generals, but men of pedigree. One former consul, accused of extorting an eastern province, was summoned to the palace. Witnesses say Domitian read the charges out loud himself. The man protested. "Every governor does this." Domitian answered, "Then every governor deserves judgment." The sentence was death. His execution sent a tremor through the Senate. This was not a personal vendetta. This was a systematic purge. Another senator was accused of bribing jurors to avoid prosecution for financial crimes. Under previous emperors, this would have ended with fines. Under Domitian, it ended with confiscation, exile, and execution. The pattern was unmistakable. Rank offered no shield. Domitian expanded treason to terrifying breeds. A senator need not plot assassination. He needed only to abuse office, mock imperial authority, protect corrupt allies, criticize the emperor's methods. Words became weapons. Silence became survival. One nobleman, executed for disloyal speech, had merely complained that executions were excessive. The irony was suffocating. Tacitus later wrote, "Under Domitian, even virtue became dangerous." Domitian's paranoia extended into belief. He demanded loyalty not just to Rome, but to himself. Those who refused imperial cult rituals were suspect. Notably, Jews who resisted certain state demands. Early Christians who refused emperor worship. While not a mass prosecutor like later emperors, Domitian selectively punished religious dissent when it intersected with elite disloyalty. Executions followed accusations of atheism, a Roman term meaning rejection of state gods. In truth, these were loyalty trials disguised as theology. No act revealed Domitian's ruthlessness more than what he did to his own blood. He executed or exiled relatives accused of corruption or disloyalty. One cousin, charged with conspiracy and improper conduct, was executed publicly. Another family member vanished into exile. Their estate seized. To Domitian, this was proof of impropriety. To Rome, it was proof of madness. A senator whispered, "If blood offers no protection, what hope do we have?" And yet, the empire worked. This was the uncomfortable truth. Provincial governors stole less. Tax revenues increased. Military pay stabilized. Public works expanded. Domitian poured money into rebuilding Rome. Fortifications along the Rhine and Danube. Roads, aqueducts, and temples. The treasury was solvent. The borders held. Rome had not been this administratively disciplined in generations. The cost was moral. Here is where the question sharpens. Was Domitian a tyrant? Or was he a ruler who did what others were too weak to do? Ancient historians, almost all senators, hated him. They wrote after his death, free to condemn. Modern historians hesitate, because beneath the blood, laws were enforced, corruption declined, the empire stabilized. One modern scholar notes, Domitian ruled harshly because Rome no longer functioned under restraint. Yet, another counters, fear creates obedience, not loyalty. Both are true. By the mid-90s AD, Rome was quiet. Too quiet. Senators smiled and plotted. Couriers bowed and listened. Servants carried secrets. Domitian had ended corruption trials, but he had created something worse. Universal fear, including among those closest to him. Executions had taught Rome how power worked. Now Rome would use that lesson against him. Step back from the executions. Step away from the Senate's hatred. What remains is an uncomfortable reality. Domitian governed well. The empire under his rule was financially stable, militarily secured, administratively disciplined. While senators whispered and trembled, Rome itself functioned. Domitian was not reckless with money. He paid the army on time, he stabilized the currency, he cracked down on tax evasion. Corruption declined, not because virtue returned, but because punishment was certain. If the Senate hated Domitian, the army did not. He increased soldiers' pay. He enforced strict discipline. He personally inspected frontier defenses. Along the Rhine and Danube, fortifications were reinforced, supply lines secured, barbarian incursions contained. Domitian spent time at the front, not as a ceremonial presence, but as a commander. Soldiers trusted him. That alone made him dangerous to Rome's elite. Domitian rebuilt Rome aggressively. Temples restored, public buildings repaired, massive construction projects commissioned. He presented himself as Rome's moral restorer, a return to old discipline and virtue. Statues portrayed him as youthful, divine, and eternal. He demanded reverence. This was not modesty, it was control. By calling himself Dominus de Zeus, he erased the illusion of shared power. There were no pretenses of republican partnership. Domitian believed mercy bred decay. In his mind, leniency encouraged corruption, compromise weakened authority, forgiveness invited betrayal. Justice had to be absolute. This belief shaped every execution. He did not enjoy bloodshed, but he accepted it, and that made him terrifying. A contemporary noted, "He did not rage, he decided." While Domitian ruled efficiently, the Senate plotted quietly. They could not challenge him openly, but they could wait. They could record grievances, they remembered names, they preserved hatred. Every execution planted another seed. Every humiliation hardened resolve. Domitian sensed it. He expanded his secret police. He increased palace security. He trusted fewer and fewer people. Isolation fed paranoia. Paranoia fed executions. The cycle closed. By the end of his reign, corruption trials had largely ended. Informers were gone. Order prevailed. But Rome had lost something else. Debate, trust, political flexibility. Fear had frozen the elite, and frozen systems shatter. Domitian's reforms were real. So was the damage. Was Domitian a tyrant? Yes, by any standards of liberty. Was he a reformer? Also yes, by any standards of governance. Rome prospered materially. Rome suffered politically. And history would not forgive him, because history was written by those he had silenced. By September of AD 96, Domitian was alone. Not physically, the palace was full of servants, guards, secretaries, but psychologically, he stood isolated at the center of a web of fear. No one spoke freely around him. Every compliment sounded rehearsed. Every silence felt conspiratorial. He trusted no one, not the Senate, not the Praetorian Guard, not even his own household. And fear, once unleashed, does not obey its master. The plot did not begin with senators. It began in the emperor's own chambers. Court officials, fearful of denunciation. Secretaries who handled accusations. Servants who overheard names. Members of the Praetorian Guard who felt undervalued. These were people who lived closest to Domitian, and therefore feared him the most. One name stands out: Stephanus, a court official who feigned injury, wrapping his arms in bandages to conceal a dagger. The conspirators did not argue philosophy, they shared one belief: if Domitian lived, none of us are safe. On September 18th, AD 96, Domitian was in his palace. He was reviewing documents, accusations, reports, names. The same machinery of justice and terror he had built now delivered his end. Stephanus entered. He claimed to have urgent information. Another conspiracy. Another betrayal. Domitian, ever suspicious, listened. As he reached for the document, Stephanus struck. The emperor fought back fiercely. Even unarmed, Domitian wounded his attacker. But others rushed in. Daggers fell again and again. Rome's most feared ruler died on the floor of the palace, bleeding beneath the symbol of his authority. He was 44 years old. The Senate erupted with joy. Within hours, they declared Dominio Memorana, condemnation of memory. Domitian's name was erased from inscriptions, monuments, public record. His statues were smashed. His images melted down. It was revenge, not justice. The same Senate that trembled in silence now rewrote history. Tacitus, Suprinius, Pliny, men who survived by restraint, wrote after with fury. They painted Domitian as a monster, and for centuries, Rome believed him. After Domitian's death, corruption slowly returned. Informers resurfaced. Senatorial privilege revived. The empire became gentler and weaker. His successors avoided his mistake. They also avoided his discipline. Rome preferred freedom, even corrupted freedom, to order enforced by terror. Yet, the system Domitian built did not vanish overnight. Fortified borders endured. Fiscal reforms lingered. Administrative habits remained. His reign cast a long shadow. Modern historians hesitate, where ancient ones raged. They ask questions Rome refused. Can corruption be crushed without brutality? Can justice survive without mercy? Can fear ever create lasting reform? Domitian believed the answer was yes. History answered differently. Picture Rome after Domitian. The Senate speaks again, trials return. Corruption seeps back into quiet corners. And yet, order holds. For now. Somewhere in the ruins of erased statues, stone fragments lie half buried. A face once called a tyrant. A ruler who killed to stop corruption, and succeeded. Briefly. Rome survived him, but Rome never truly resolved the problem he confronted.